Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Commonwealth Games Culture and Physical Activity Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I'll just start off firstly just to note that this meeting has been changed to an informal online meeting due to a number of officers who wanted to provide their updates online. So we thought it's most appropriate just to switch it online for that reason. Okay, apologies, Councillor Jan. Sorry, can everybody else hear me okay? Councillor Jan has just said that she can't hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Councillor Jan, maybe if you want to, hear you. That's fine. Sorry, it's just because I don't know how to fix the problem even. And the only thing I can suggest is if you were to just leave the meeting and then come back again, as it may be an issue on your end, possibly. We'll carry on if everybody else can hear me. So yeah, that's the reason why we've switched over for it to be an online meeting. And then we'll go straight to the agenda. So just to note that this recording of the meeting will be available on the council's YouTube site, and that members of the press or public may record and take photographs except for any confidential or exempt items. Apologies. I don't think I have any apologies from any members, but if there are any, then you can indicate or put in the chat if anybody else has sent their apologies. I'll pause. Councillor Straker-Wells, you raised your hand.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say, I'll have to leave, if I may, just before 3 o'clock, because I've got a visit to a school and that can't be altered, unfortunately. So please forgive me.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on then to declarations of interest. There's none. Then the action notes item 4 will be deferred until the next formal meeting, so we won't be able to do that at this meeting. And then going on to the next agenda item, I'll be moving. I know we've got item 5 for the Council Management Director, and then 6 is the Digital and Customer Services. But I believe we've got the Deputy Leader in attendance for item 6. So I'll take item 6 before item 5, if that's okay with the officers. So that would mean if Peter's in, we can go ahead with Peter's item. I think you, if I'm correct in saying, Peter, you may have to, somebody said they had to leave, or was it somebody in the previous agenda item will arrive by slightly later. So we'll take this item first then. And also, before you begin, if I can just check, yes, sorry, Councillor John. So I was aware that the Deputy Leader is in attendance, and if you wanted to say anything before Peter, then you can, or otherwise you can hand straight over to Peter. We'll take your presentation, Peter, and then if members have got any questions, like normal, please just do indicate by raising your hand or dropping a comment in the chat box. I'll hand over to you guys. Thank you.
Cool. Just a quick one from me to say thanks for looking at this. Peter will talk you through all the ins and outs of what we're doing. There's a huge amount in this directorate and also under some of Becky's presentation that falls in my portfolio around also the background, behind the scenes help for the games. I'm with you until 2 o'clock, at which point I'm going to have to run, but I'll hand over to Peter to talk you through the exciting stuff.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jones, and thank you, Chair. I will be reasonably short and sweet on the update of how Digital and Customer Services is supporting the Commonwealth Games. I have brought up on the screen the materials that you've already got as part of your agenda. Can I just double check? Can everyone hear that, see that, and hear me?
Yes.
That's great. Thank you so much. So Digital and Customer Services is supporting the games in a number of ways, primarily in the operational readiness for the games itself, the fit out of the Alexander Stadium, and ensuring our role when customers contact the council is understood and ready for the games. So in terms of the first of those objectives, supporting the council's project team and operational services in readiness for the game. The picture you've got in front of you just gives you a very, very simplified overview of what we're doing. We're providing a number of tools for the program team to use around document management, reporting, and the communication. We're also supporting the internal delivery teams around mapping software to help with the things like city dressing and traffic routes and incident tracking and general resiliency when the games is actually run. And we're also supporting them with a number of technology interventions to improve stakeholder engagement, community fund, to ensure that citizens, visitors and businesses interacting with the games before, during and after is as optimal as it can be. And the picture at the bottom just illustrates that we've still got some work in progress to actually work through what will happen for city readiness around incident management. And I mean that in terms of the technology support, how the contact centre will help, and the various requirements around the fit out of the operations centre. In terms, the other area that we're supporting the games is the fit out to the Alexander Stadium. Members will know that it is going through a massive refurbishment. All the technology support that's actually currently in there will be replaced, and new equipment installed to support the ongoing position with the stadium. But obviously that also supports the the execution on the ground. So we're getting those networking servers and all the other things that you'd expect operational, ready for our handover, which we will where the stadium will be taken over exclusively by the organising committee from the 27th of April, working through what the support arrangements will be pre and post games up to the 4th of November, and then basically the systems that are there are sort of effectively handed back for normal operational management. We're also starting discussions now with the Commonwealth Games Program team around what the expectations will be from a customer contact point of view during the games. Particularly in instances where there are issues around the members of the public who are concerned about traffic closures and all of that kind of thing. And we haven't done that work yet, but we are working through the detail of what that could look like, and that will develop in December, and then further activity will roll out beyond that once we're clear what we're talking about and how the games will be supported. So in summary, generally focuses around the technical requirements to support the games, supporting the program team, and then the ensuring that the customer contact is as good as it can be before, during, and immediately post the games as well. I've been in contact with the organising committee around further work that they are doing, particularly from a legacy perspective, and they have indicated to me that there will be some further opportunities for how the games will enhance the region's digital infrastructure, and they're working with an organisation called HPE, who are committed to leaving behind a legacy of digital sustainability in the West Midlands, and they will be working with Birmingham in 2022 to ensure that on-site equipment is made available to the community once it's been decommissioned from the games itself. We're also the organising committee are also doing some further work around what the digital spectator experience and how that's going to work, from how you buy your tickets to how you get results to how you navigate the city, and they're working quite closely with a new digital platform provider who will help with that. There's also quite a lot of work around UK digital creativity that the Games is going to showcase, which I think is really important. They're also doing quite a lot of work around how the games can engage people digitally through the Games Education Program. There's quite a few things going on there, particularly also a broadcast training initiative which they have signed to encourage diversity in the creative sector. So that's very positive, again enabled by that kind of digital legacy. And that's probably the bulk of it. There's quite a lot going on. A lot of it's being delivered from a legacy perspective by the OC. There's certainly more potential that we can take advantage of, but that's the basic summary for members in terms of digital and customer services. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Thank you for that presentation, Peter. I'm just going to pause for a moment to see if I've got any questions or comments from members of the committee. Yeah, Councillor Straker-Wells, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Peter. I'm normally terrified when I'm in the presence of anything technologically challenging, but you've made it all very easy. In fact, I think you must be psychic as well, because you've dealt with some of the questions that I had. But anyway, here goes. The key question for me is simply this. I mean, this event is going to be transmitted across the world, but are we doing absolutely everything possible to ensure that our own citizens are included in all of it? And I've got some sub-questions. I mean, that's the main question in my head. Are we in danger of missing citizens who are not online? How can we check that the communications are getting through to the public? How will the games impact on our own communication systems? And I think you actually touched on that.
The internet, it says APL internet access. You're on.
Oh, this is. Oh, thank you.
Is there an internet?
Sorry, Councillor Straker-Wells. Would you be able to just mute your? Thank you. Apologies for that interruption. Martin, did you want to maybe start the beginning of your sub-question again, just because there was a bit of interference?
Oh, you
sorry about that. Thank you.
You're gonna have to listen to all that again. No, I won't. And I'll try and summarise it. It's about the communications. It's about how the games will impact on our own communication system. I think you touched on that we're going to be learning quite a lot from this particular exercise. Is there an interactive platform for feedback from customers? And you also touched on how media contact is going to assist the legacy. But could you say a little bit more about that? Because the legacy is one of the key things that we're really worried about. But just to summarise, it really is about how we make sure absolutely everybody is involved, regardless of where they are technologically and what equipment they have. So.
Thank you. I will do my best, although a lot of that questions needs to be addressed to the sort of organising committee, particularly around how they're engaging with all the communities across the city, whether they are digitally enabled or not. In terms of the council's communication infrastructure, we are putting quite a lot of time and effort to ensure that we protect both the games.
Plus or M or something.
Hello, sorry. Do you want me to continue, Chair?
Yes, please. Sorry about that. Can I just remind all members if they can just keep their mics and their cameras muted and off unless you are speaking, because we've had a couple of disturbances and I'd like it if we don't have any more. Thank you.
Apologies, Chair. I will do my best. But just to repeat, I haven't got any specific information of how the organising committee is going to engage all of the communities across Birmingham, whether they're digitally enabled or not. As I said, we are working hard to protect the council and the games from any malicious attacks, which I think might have been behind your question around communication systems. We've done a lot of work around training and support, particularly for employees, as well as putting in new technical controls around that. I understand on the media contact, there's an organisation called Sunset and Vine, who the OC have appointed to do some as part of their broadcast work, and I can send members a link to the a news item that indicated the work that they are going to do around diversity in the creative sector. So I'm sorry I can't give you too much more to answer that kind of question, because a lot of that is in the purview of the organising committee to actually deliver.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Straker-Wells, for your question, and for Peter for answering that. I'm just going to check to see if there's any other questions or comments from elected members before I continue. Okay, Peter, like I said, thank you for your presentation, and I think, like always, committee members of this committee completely understand where some bits of information lie with different parts of our collective Commonwealth Games of organisation. Some of the stuff comes under the organising committee, some of it's council led, then we've got other stakeholders involved and things like that. And we also understand in terms of timing as to when things can be shared with us. I think we've got used to not having all the answers whenever we ask the questions, but I'm just a little bit keen to find out a little bit more on the back of what Councillor Straker-Wells said around ensuring that, I think the gist of the question that I got was around ensuring that all of our residents of Birmingham feel that they are connected and engaged with the games when it comes to the digital aspect being the channels for them to have access. I understand that the engagement aspects of the engagement elements may not necessarily be under your directorate or portfolio, but I do believe that it should be the council's responsibility to ensure that our citizens, and even if it's asking the organising committee to ensure that the elements that they're responsible for are happening, I think that we should be, and we may be doing quite a lot already, but we should definitely be taking on that responsibility to ensure that we ask those questions as to making sure that our citizens of Birmingham do not feel digitally unconnected, if that's a term.
Yeah. I understand. I think I understand the point you're making. I will certainly take that feedback back into the programme team that are executing the games on behalf of the council. Because clearly we all want everyone to engage in it, whether they've got a device or not. In fact, it should be irrelevant. Their experience should be as good as it can be. What I can do is certainly, and I will send separately some of the various announcements that members might not be aware of around the various work around engaging people through a games education programme, which was one of the recommendations that I and a number of other stakeholders put in 2019, and they've taken that forward in things like a youth programme. There's a Jobs and Skills Academy, a learning programme. There's the apprenticeships that they're working in. There's United by Birmingham Community Engagement Scheme, Gen 22. I will put all this in the chat and I can send it separately, and that will give members an indication. But I'll take the broad question back, if I may, Chair.
Yes, okay, that's absolutely fine. I did have a couple of other sort of questions that you may be able to answer now. You know, with the work that's already in process within the digital aspects, have we taken on any apprenticeships or done anything to bring in particularly young people to be involved in the processes, setting things up or supporting some of the work that we're doing at the moment in relation to the games?
Not in terms of the direct work that Digital and Customer Services has been coordinating and enabling on behalf of the games delivery, no. But I know that the organising committee have, and I'll include those links for members separately, if that's okay.
Thank you. And I mean, if we put sort of the question for young people aside, being, you know, a brilliant city of Birmingham. We've got a lot of organisations and people who are involved in the digital creativity sector in Birmingham. Have we brought in any other people or any other organisations in terms of other stakeholders to support what the council's doing in relation to digital connectivity in the run-up of setting the games?
Apart from some of the technology providers that the OC have engaged or we've engaged for the stadium fit out, for example, there isn't anybody else that I'm aware of.
Okay, thank you. My final question is around around the legacy aspects. And I know that you did mention that there will be a number of things that will remain in the city for the residents of Birmingham to make use of post games. Would you be able to give us at this stage a run through of the kind of things that our residents can expect for us to continue to have post games?
Yeah, I think there's a couple that the organising committee have indicated to me. One is around the equipment that they're going to be using, and they've made an announcement around that, and that's the organisation called HPE. The organising committee has also put in a lot extra connectivity to all the venues, 22 gigabit links, which are very powerful links that people can use. It will be up to the venues, though, whether they choose to continue with that kind of infrastructure in the venues concerned, things like Alexander Stadium, the Aquatic Centre, Sutton Park, Cannock Chase, and a few others. There was debate about the game showcasing 5G technology. The members will know that the council has been supporting the rollout of 5G on top of the existing 4G services. And again, how those will continue in the games venues is an open question at the moment. So I think at the moment, I would say the sort of technical infrastructure, the connectivity, is an area that there will be some legacy. In terms of any other digitally enabled connectivity, I would say it's probably limited at this point in time. And again, I can send you a summary of the kind of things that are in the that the games have indicated to me are in that opportunity space.
Thank you. I did say that was my last question, but whilst we were talking, I decided to brainstorm mentally, and I just have a sort of another question that's just popped to mind. I don't know if it already exists or if there's plans for it, but I thought maybe this might be the right place and person to ask. Will we have an app for the games?
I understand there is an app under development by the organising committee that will bring together things like the ticketing, signposting, and other things. But I don't know. They haven't made it public, so it'll have things like results, and it will integrate with wayfinding and ticket sales and all of those kind of things. So I understand it was so, but I've got no further detail at this point in time, I'm afraid.
Okay, and this definitely is going to be my last comment, but it was actually on the back of what you said previously around it will be down to the venues to decide whether they use the structures that will remain, if I'm correct.
That's right, it is, yes.
So would that mean making use of them would be at a cost based on that would be
potentially. I mean, for Alexander Stadium, that's a key part of the council's infrastructure anyway. So that we will once it's been handed back to us, because obviously the games will take over, then yes, that will continue, and that will support the venue and all the activities. Be they major events or smaller events that go on at the games, absolutely. But in terms of some of the other venues, so like the aquatics venue, that's really under the control of Sandwell. They will need to decide what bits of it they're going to allow to continue. But I cannot imagine they wouldn't, because I cannot imagine they wouldn't want to provide a great experience for their users, and technology is always going to be a really important part of that. However, the thing I'm not able to comment on is what they will specifically choose to do. Obviously, it's in the hands of those venues, and they're not all owned by the City Council.
Yeah, no, that's completely understandable, and it makes sense. That's fine. Thank you. Thank you once again for coming along to committee and giving us your presentation and answering the questions.
Thank you for coming. Just one final point on you mentioned about apps. Just again for clarity, and I should have been clear, so apologies. The council isn't going to develop itself any kind of apps that are Android or Apple that people can download for the games experience. That will be very much for the organising committee, and I probably should have made that clearer.
Okay, no, that's fine. Thank you. Thank you again for attending and answering any questions. And then the bits that you weren't able to provide at the moment, then you can send them over.
I will send them through,
and then we can circulate them with the rest of the members.
Great. Thank you so much, and thank you all for listening and with your questions too. Thank you.
Thank you. We can now move on to the next agenda item then, which would have been number 5. But if I can introduce Becky Hellard, and then you might want to introduce the other officers that you've got as part of your team, and then so I'll hand over to you, and then you can tell us who will do whatever part of the presentation.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Yeah, and I don't know, is somebody supporting this committee going to share slides, or I can do it if not?
Just a second, I'll just check to see whether
I can do the slides if you like, Becky. No problem.
Yeah, that's fine. That's cool.
Thank you. Just switch off then.
Okay, so just while we're getting those up, we'll need it in slideshow, I'm thinking, will we, to make it big enough for people to be able. Oh, Craig's got the technology. Thank you, Craig. Okay, so we were asked to come along and share with you how Council Management Directorate, which covers a number of different disciplines, was supporting the Commonwealth Games now, and also to think about how it might support the Commonwealth Games in legacy terms. So there'll be a number of different officers coming into this, but if we just move to the next slide, that kind of sets out how we're going to approach this. So look, it's actually broader even than what's written here. So there are 4 main elements to this. Firstly, all of the financial work, the work we're doing now to support the games and how we'll support the legacy going forward. Then the legal element to this, as you can imagine, working across the broad partnership that forms the organising committee, there's a huge number of legal documents going forward, and some that are already completed. And we're also developing the legacy documents that need legal agreement too. In procurement terms, and we're going to focus particularly on social value here, because obviously that's particularly important, and I've got Alison, I think, here to support on that, and that's the one that we'll go first with. But I don't want to forget the element that isn't written here, but we have included on the slides, which is all of the different employment pathways into the organisation, what we hope to do in the future, as well as what we've achieved so far through the social value route. So if members are okay, if we move straight on to the social value element, because we've got some key major projects here, so we've been able to ask quite a lot of the contractors. If that's okay, I'll hand across to Alison.
Yeah, thank you, Becky. So happy to pick this up. Steve Sandicott Handcock is our Interim AD of Procurement, and you will see there's an awful lot of detail and an awful lot of really good social value that we've been able to drive out of these contracts. Social value is an integral part of all of our contract negotiation and setting up, and also for some of these, particularly Alexander Stadium, where we have any grant funding in there, that again is an integral part of all of the grant agreements, that there is indeed social value, outputs and outcomes included in those agreements too. So what we set out here for you are some of the principal contracts in play with the Commonwealth Games, and it won't surprise you that the bulk of them are with Alexander Stadium. So the first couple of slides show the items that have been, or the elements that are negotiated and embedded in the contract with McLaughlin and Harvey. Now, see, I could read these through, but you'll see the things that we absolutely prioritise really are job creation. And that's we have a team within the council, also the employment access team, that works with the contractors as we go through the negotiation stages. We don't just leave it for contractors to bid in and say what they will do. We also maximise it through that contract letting stage. So here we have 32 new jobs, 27 safeguarded, apprenticeships, graduates. We count the hours and the local markets being used, that will SMEs and provision of supplies and services where possible. This is one of the smaller ones. If we move down, I don't know if it'd be easy for me to drive, but we'll keep it on. So one of the things we also do is where we have excess materials, we will look for community projects. And therefore we'll be building networks around the stadium and any other sites, and that's with local schools, local communities within the region. Schools are engaged and there have been tours of the stadium. We have, as you know, live cameras up in the stadium. So it's very much part of the integrated engagement element. And I know that at your last meeting, there was a lot there from the school side. This is, if you like, a different aspect to it, but it's how that the council management directorate is supporting the other directorates also in delivering what they are delivering on the ground within their area. So we've got on this contract 12 community organisations directly supported, including volunteer time, community projects supported. We've established, the company's established community fund to support other organisations, and there's fundraising activities ongoing. So it's building a community within the programme and within the project. This one also, you'll notice, interestingly, particularly this week with the headlines, 100% of all the packaging waste is recycled. It's either taken back by the supplier and used elsewhere, used in addition, or completely recycled and reused. So that's a real achievement on this one. So looking then at the design services for the stadium, again, it's new jobs, new graduates. The office facilities have been obliged, if you know, it's contracted, 35% of their spend is with local suppliers. Again, schools and colleges engaged. And work experience is also being offered across Birmingham, not just in the immediate area, but across Birmingham, and placements will be made within this project. And again, on this one, there's 15 schools being supported on the design side. Mace Limited, they're also putting in work placements and supporting people back into work, which is, you know, that's a new facet. That's one that's particularly pleasing. These are often people who have been unemployed or finding it difficult to find work, and they're supported back again through teams within the council as we work with the contractors. So there's employment support, and part of that is CV writing, interview skills, support both to the contractors, employees as they interview and work with applicants, and direct support to applicants. Included in this is skills training, on the job skills training, and again, schools supported through the Mace Limited contract. There you go. So Turner and Townsend, this is project management support. So we're looking at different skills here. There's a number of skills just on one project, you know, construction, design, application, project management. There's a whole raft, and again, we're looking at skills for local people, support to schools and colleges, placements. Again, looking at using local employees within a 30-mile radius. This one's also got additional volunteering hours and a cash donation into that community element. Host city program management services. This is moving away necessarily from a direct capital build, but here we have Over Arup and partners, and again, so they're supporting the council on delivery of the Commonwealth Games, and again, we're looking at pulling in new jobs, new opportunities for people living locally, including apprenticeships, placements, support to young people, and again, this one we have also negotiated cash donations for community projects. Thanks, Craig. Infrastructure works, these roads and services to some of our capital areas. Again, this contract with Alan Griffiths, so we have new employees. Again, that requirement to spend a level within local SMEs, community project volunteering and work experience, and again, CO2 emission reduction across the contract. Peribar Regeneration Scheme, this one is let by Lend-Lease. And again, we've got person hours, so that's training and employment and sustainable jobs in construction. We've got again spend with this one with the voluntary sector, also third sector, at least 1% of their budget, 60% within SMEs. Again, we're looking at mileage from the site for spend with suppliers, and we've got different bands here that we've been able to implement. 100% of their subcontractors have been found from Find It in Birmingham, and again, by registering in Find It in Birmingham, you're enlarging that network of companies and enterprises, and again, so you've got some knock-on benefits there. So all of their spend is posted through that platform. People have to live within the site, 60% within 30 miles. There's a skills hub on site, which enhances all the training and facilities available for apprenticeships, new jobs. And all of the construction phase jobs have been appointed to through the Employment Access Team within Birmingham City Council. Further to this, again, we have upskilling. Again, I mentioned the training hub on site, and that's a range of skills. So there's work placements, volunteer time, community organisation support, and a real focus on key priorities for the council. So homelessness, youth unemployment, needs care leavers, fuel poverty, and health and wellbeing. We've built into this one, this is one of the larger contracts, as you may imagine. So it's 10,000 students supported across the schools through reading, mentoring, careers advice. So, you know, there's a huge opportunity here with the amount of construction and constructing type contractors in our region to maximise these opportunities for students going into school, choosing their courses, deciding what to do when they leave. We've got so much on our doorstep to be able to show them and to be able to encourage them with. Again, on this one, we have the recycling of reusable excess materials, and on this one, we've had paid intern placements, again, using the City Council to support that. There are more opportunities, and I think I've given you an example of some of those larger contracts. As I said, all of the contracts will negotiate social value. All of the grants have social value requirements within them, and we are looking to maximise that. And in many times, it's not difficult. The contractors themselves have really bought into this agenda, so there are some really good conversations, but we do push them very hard on that. And one of the new initiatives that the council has and that our contractors are looking at is Match My Project. And if I can encourage you to look at that. And that is where community organisations will post the projects that they're working on. And they may be posting a project that needs, for example, pallets or wood or some sort of skills. And then our contractors and partners can go into that portal And if they have some opportunity to be able to match or to help that project, then we're able to put the two organisations in touch with each other. And again, we're getting a lot more opportunities and benefits from that over and above what we're building into the contract. I'll pause there to come to the end of the procurement side and the social value side to see if there are any questions that I can either ask or take back to the procurement AD.
Alison, I think I saw a couple in the chat which you might not have seen because you were very busy presenting.
Have a look.
Councillor Mosquito has raised, will we have a good mix of people employed in these new jobs?
I don't know the answer to that. The council's team, employment access team, works with the contractors to do that. So obviously that is part of their remit. That's something that we can find out who has been employed, who has been successful, and see what statistics are available. All of these elements are monitored as part of the contract and as part of any grant conditions. So we'll see what detail is available there for you.
And a further one, supporting the VCSEs.
Fundraisers. Okay, again, I'd have to look into what we are doing there, Councillor, and get a reply back to you on what we're doing there.
Thank you, Alison, for going through that presentation. I'm just going to pause for a moment to see if any other members would like to indicate if they've got any questions. Councillor Straker-Wells.
Thank you, Chair. I'm quite uplifted to hear about the commitment to social value in terms of the contracts, opportunities for apprenticeships, work experience, and enrichments for schools and colleges. And of course, I know it's in our manifesto, but we used to refer to the Preston model, also our procurement and local support for the local economy. I think in future, perhaps we'll start talking about the Birmingham model, because this is very, very encouraging. Could I ask a specific question about one element? And the Chair touched on it, and it's something that's very dear to my heart. The creative arts and the creative industries have taken a real hammering, and I just wonder whether there's any way of providing support for the creative arts and the creative industries. And I know there are grants available for them, but considering, first of all, how much they contribute to both the local and national economy, but also how much they've been hit, it would be really helpful if there was a way of supporting them. And then the final question, I suppose, really is, where are we likely to see which particular sector is going to benefit most from the kind of social value inputs you've been mentioning? Is there a particular sector of the economy, or is there a particular branch of employment that's likely to benefit from all of this? Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. If I can come in on the first point with the creative arts and industries, I think in looking at the organisations that are being supported for Councillor Mosquito's question, that I would hope to see, I'll be able to explain whether there are any arts organisations on there. I will, though, need to take that question back to the chair of the organising committee of Commonwealth Games team, because there are other opportunities perhaps not presented on the social value side when we look at city dressing and opportunities across the city. I know there have been opportunities for local artists. When we looked at the Be Bold Be Birmingham on top of the car park over towards Smithfield. So that was a local artist and opportunity given there. But to be able to answer your question better, I would need to refer to colleagues, please. And then on your second point about which sectors might see a greater benefit from the social value, I think when we're looking at the jobs, the apprenticeships, the on-the-job training, and even that sort of advice to school leavers, I think just by the very nature of the contracts that we've talked about today, we are looking, I guess, at that construction industry, design, project management. And whilst that might seem narrow, there are many facets to it, and project management could actually cover any kind of industry. I think those are the ones that are driving those hours and those training weeks. But how those who are taking that opportunity then benefit and using them. I expect that will be wider, but I think if I were trying to, see which was the most popular answer on this one, I think we're probably looking at sort of that construction, just for these side of the contracts we've spoken of today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Alison, for responding to Councillor Straker-Well's questions. Do we have any other questions from members before I go ahead with a couple of the ones I had? No, in that case, Alison, it has been...
Chair, if I may,
sure.
Just to say how intrigued I am at the Match My Project initiative. And the only question I want, that was in my mind, first of all, I think it's a fantastic idea. How well publicised has it been to enable people to, and what is the take-up? It's very early days, I know, but what is the take-up so far? Because if I've got it right, it is about local, possibly voluntary organisations taking advantage of what companies could provide them in terms of sort of matched support, resource, etc. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm afraid I don't have the answer to that for you today, but I will refer to colleagues and we'll get something back to you on how that take-up has gone.
Thank you.
And just to confirm, Councillor, that you are correct in your assumption of what it is.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Alison. I think we've had a detailed run through the presentation to see a lot of the work that is intended to take place and a lot of the key commitments. And it is really good to have a look at these examples of the key commitments to be delivered by the contractor and their supply chains for the major projects, for both construction projects and professional services to support the schemes. However, are there any robust procedures in place to ensure compliance with the commitments made? And also, what happens if they do not comply with the commitments? So I've got a couple of specific ones that I'm interested to know how we are monitoring that, or who is the team behind ensuring that these commitments, they look good as bullet points in our presentation, but I understand that a lot of work would need to take place to ensure that they're actually fulfilling those commitments. So, for example, on the bit on page 23 of 68, if you wanted to, Craig, or whoever's running it, to go back, there was a bullet point in relation to, well, it says commit to provide at least 35 one-week work experience placements across Birmingham schools, which include 4 to 6 placements across a project. I mean, I'm just wondering, it sounds brilliant, but is it actually happening? And do we know who's checking whether it's taking place? And then a couple of sort of slides down, under the A34 infrastructure works, there's a bullet point on 5% reduction in CO2 emissions over the course of the contract. Again, as a commitment, and looking at social value sounds brilliant, but I'm just wondering how does that get monitored, and who does that to ensure that or is there compliance in ensuring that it's being fulfilled? And again, back to part 2 of the original question, what happens if they don't comply with the commitments that you've presented to us?
Okay, thank you. Just to, in general, where it is a contractual obligation or an obligation within a grant contract, then those are monitored by the people monitoring those contracts. Now, I have got open on my screen, because I was sort of pulling together various bits of information, I think, for the next part on the finance. But if I look at the latest update dashboards, for example, on Alexander Stadium, so there is an element in there that states the environmental and social value benefits are being delivered in line with the KPIs and targets. So that's the contract manager's update to the board for its next meeting. So it's done in that way. It's monitored as with the dashboards that are also looking at progress on the programme. So it is monitored, and I will under each of the contracts. What happens if they don't deliver? I don't know each contract individually, but if I think about some of the contracts that I've looked at, particularly on the grant side, there are penalties for elements that are not delivered. So there is potentially there could be grant clawback, or what I've often seen on a delivery contract is, for example, you promised that you would provide 15 hours per week of apprenticeship training. If you fail to do that, you will pay me the following amount so that we, the council, can go and buy that training from somebody else. So that is normally the way in which contractors are held to account on these social value promises. They're not add-ons, they are integral parts of their delivery obligations.
Okay, well, I think that's reassuring to hear that there are those opportunities, and I can understand if with specific certain contracts it will vary depending on what it is that they are that they're committed to offering us. So thank you again, Alison, for your part of the presentation. I'm just going to pause for a quick second to see if there were any other comments or questions from members, and otherwise I can hand back to Becky to continue. That's fine. Becky, if you'd like to carry on. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the next element of this is the financial support that we're already giving to Commonwealth Games, and this is another element of Alison's major projects capital team, and I have a direct role in it on the audit, risk and assurance committee and things, but it's best that Alison probably gives us an overview, if that's all right, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Becky. So as you'd expect from a finance team, this is a major programme that we are managing on behalf of the council, as you say, being led by Becky, and support being led in the major capital finance team. So within that, we will be sitting on the various boards for some of these projects. For example, Alexander Stadium's the big one, Perry Bar. We also advise on the Stanwell Aquatic Centre, and we have an oversight of all the capital projects that are ongoing. So as part of that, we would be advising, negotiating, monitoring, reporting, etc., as you would expect. In addition, if you like, to that almost business as usual, the team is embedded in these key governance meetings and the committees, and representing the council and in some respects the region at those boards. So we have the capital programme board and the exec board, which is where all of the capital elements come together. Each capital project has its own board, and we've got team members on that at different levels. Some are providing information and then taking back change requests and doing all the modelling. Other elements, be it Becky, myself, or my major capital lead, we're in there sort of advising on decision making and negotiating, so different levels. We have the budget oversight group, finance directors group, which Becky attends, and that's chaired by DCMS. So these are national committees. The audit and risk assurance committee, again, that's one that Becky is very active at driving on. We are integral to all of the contract approvals committee decisions. We are on programme boards, and then sort of more locally, we have the finance, risk and legal group, which is one that I chair, and we look at all as it says on the tin, really, the various elements to that. We list there some of the capital projects supported, and as I mentioned, we do all the dashboards and the monitoring and the reporting on those. Craig, if you could, thank you very much. So in addition to all the wider capital programme, we have the City Readiness Programme, which has a budget in the council's published budget book of 15 million. So we're allocating that and monitoring that. Looking to make sure that everything is delivered against that from our various city readiness excuse me, streams across the council. One area of that sits within council management also is the city dressing. That's managed by the advertising contract lead, and that's looking at dressing the entire city. You will have seen a flavour of this at the Year to Go event. You'll have seen hopefully the big banner that was on the massive banner outside on the car park at Paradise. So we'll also be looking at 3D elements to that, drone elements. dressing all of the routes for the Queen's Baton Relay and the marathons, looking at flags and banners, but also very much for the Birmingham event anyway, working with parks people so that we're not just putting up dressing and banners that are up for a few weeks and then taken down. We're looking at spending that budget on planters and signs that have got a lasting legacy effect. So there's a bit of a change there in the way that we're doing that. The teams also on there, we work very closely with the accountable body representative for the GBS LEP. So we're working with them on their contribution, and also the combined authority, their 25 million contribution as well. And I think, as we've already said, procurement also sits within council management for Becky. And quite apart from the large social value side of things, of course, we've got all of the contracts that we have to ensure that they're all in place. And even those business as usual contracts, where they're going to impact the games, we've not got any breaks happening at that time. We want it to be very slick over that period. So there's a lot of work ongoing on the procurement side too. And I think that's it for the finance slides. Yes, so if there's any questions on that element.
Thank you, Alison, again for going through the finance part of the presentation. As always, I'll wait to see if there's any indications from any members. See if you've got any questions on Councillor Straker-Welds. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, whenever money comes up, I always become extremely nervous. And one of the things that I suppose I would find most difficult is the sheer complexity of this arrangement, and how it all comes together. Now, it seems to be fitting together brilliantly, and I guess there's probably an overall group in charge who can, like a helicopter group, who check that everything is in line, the infrastructure, the finances, and so on and so forth. But let me just ask 3 simple questions. Hopefully I'll be able to understand this. First of all, are the strategic operations in line with planning, and are the finances on track? And the final question for the truly nervous, and I count myself amongst those, if additional costs arise, will they be underwritten? I say this because almost every single games or every single commitment of this kind has, through no fault of the organisations, gone over budget. And I am sure this is going to be unique and unusual in not going over budget. But if something does happen that is untoward or whatever, will the cost be underwritten? I hope by the government or by somebody with a lot of dosh. Thank you, Chair.
I can on the position we are at the moment with our capital programme is on budget and importantly on time. Because obviously that's a huge element for us that it's not a deadline that can move, and our revenue budget also is on track and on time. I think for your larger overall question, if I can defer to Becky, who heads up and manages the full programme for the council.
Yeah, thanks, Alison. That's fine. So, as you say, it's really complex. There's loads of different partners involved. There are only, though, 2 funding partners. That's DCMS and ourselves. What I would say to you is that the Audit Risk and Assurance Committee spends an awful lot of time looking at all of the budget risks. So does the budget operating group, and so do the finance directors. So all of those meet on a monthly basis, and there's an awful lot of focus quite clearly on each element of the capital and the revenue to ensure that we understand where the pressures are. And you'll no doubt know this already, but just to make sure, we do have contingencies where we, for each of the major capital programs, so we do have somewhere to go. You'll know that we can't afford time delays. This is a hard set of deadlines, and you'll know out there at the moment there's significant inflation where it comes to any construction supplies and services, as well as delays in terms of HGV drivers, etc. So this is monitored very, very closely across the whole programme. So that does mean that if one element of the programme is appearing to have a budget risk pressure there, then there's other elements of the programme that we can go to. But this is why there is so much focus put on the financial management of it, as well as the delivery. Does that help at all?
Yes. I mean, the monitoring part is the thing that I suppose is most reassuring, that there's a constant oversight of what's going on right across the board.
Yeah.
And everybody's talking to everybody else about not only what's happening, what it'll cost in terms of inflation and so on, because there are also so many uncertainties. Yes,
Absolutely.
thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Strakerwell, for your question. And again, to Alison and Becky for answering. I normally would have had a question at this point, but Councillor Strakerwell's already asked the question I was going to ask. So I don't have one anymore. It's just in relation to obviously about us being on target with regards to the various different budgets. But you've already responded and touched on that. So I'm more than happy for you to take back over and continue with the rest of the presentation then, Becky, unless any other members had anything. I'll pause. Nope, okay, hand over to Becky again then, thank you.
So we're moving on to the legal input here, and I've got Connie and Satinder. I don't know who's taking this one, but what I would say to you again is that there are weekly touchdown points on this, are there not, Connie? Between finance, legal and myself, just to ensure that everything is unlocked and unblocked and heading in the right direction. So Connie is our resident expert, I think, supported by Satinder. Is that fair?
That is fair. Thank you for the introduction, Becky, and afternoon members. So I'm joined today and this afternoon by two of my colleagues, Connie Price and Sushil Tabani. So Connie will broadly outline the journey of the legal inputs from the commercial legal team within legal services and the input from the privacy and information law team. I will then hand over to my colleague Sushil Tabani, who will talk about the property aspects that form an integral part of the games. And just looking at the agenda pack, I don't know if Craig, if you can hear me, Craig, you want to cover pages 37 and 68, and I will pick up page 39 because that's the last legal input slide. So I will hand over to Connie to talk about the legal input journey for the games.
Okay, thank you, Satinder. The first slide is really looking back, as probably most of it is. We started in 2017 with commissioning the Games feasibility study. Originally, of course, we were aiming for 2026, but things changed and we had to roll things forward just a little bit. The commercial team did play quite a significant part in preparing and submitting the bid back at the end of 2017, which secured the award of the games to the council. And we then took matters forward, negotiating the host city contract, which is a huge thing and not the easiest document, I think, to negotiate. Following that, I suppose one of the first things we did was to complete the contract for the redevelopment of Alexander Stadium with McLaughlin and Harvey. And pretty much simultaneously started on the construction of the Athletes Village, which, as we know, later became the Perry Bar Regeneration Scheme, a housing scheme that we are still advising on. In amongst the mix was the Commonwealth Games Bill becoming an Act of Parliament, and which, of course, for us was a first, but was actually a very worthwhile experience and very rewarding experience taking a bill through Parliament. And currently, we're advising on the implementation, including the contingency and mitigation measures to supplement any shortfall in legislation. I should, however, say that we now have some excellent additional legal support in the form of a secondee from a local firm. That individual works specifically within Craig's programme management team on a pretty much full-time basis. I don't need to say that the Commonwealth Games is very resource intensive and has taken an awful lot of legal time over the period. The dedicated support is most welcome and is an excellent addition. The external provider, however, and I meet every week and there is regular liaison and updates to the monitoring officer, tracking and highlighting risks. As Becky has already indicated, she and I and finance also meet very regularly, most weeks, to discuss these risks and the financial implication of everything we have an eye on. We specifically do also have an eye to legacy items. We monitor and are keen to ensure that we keep abreast of any matters or any items that have a life beyond the end of the game. So that speaks to the residual liabilities as well as the many positive legacy benefits for the citizens of Birmingham. And this includes the future use of facilities built for the games. Within all of that, and if you can move on to the next slide, please, are some specific areas. Privacy and information law is very important across the piece in a project of this size. So we have negotiated a very comprehensive overarching data sharing agreement between DCMS and the Games Organising Committee, which then has a spin-off, a number of subordinate DSAs with other games parties. We also created a bespoke process for handling freedom of information requests in collaboration with the games partners, because we know how laborious that can be as a process across the council. So it was felt necessary to carve that out for a nice, streamlined, snappy, quick process for the games, and that seems to be working very well indeed. Next slide, please. And at this point, I think my colleague Sashil will be able to take us through the current contributions as regards properties.
Good afternoon, members. Thank you, Connie. Members, the legal team that I head obviously has responsibilities for compulsory purchase, planning and highways, and property transactions. And the team has supported the commercial team as and when necessary with regard to sort of real estate aspects of anything to do with the Commonwealth Games. The slide is just intended to give you a flavour of some of the matters that have been handled, but there are sort of a plethora of sort of lesser matters that deal with the Commonwealth Games. You know, just from the listing of our matters, you know, it relates to anything from, you know, leases of electricity substations on any developments connected to the Commonwealth Games, temporary licenses for, you know, land use for purposes, and ranging from sort of full-blown sales and purchase contracts for acquisitions and interests in land. So that's been our contribution, sort of in close cooperation with, you know, with my colleagues in the commercial team, and all of these sort of aspects are still ongoing. My team is also still involved with some of the legacy aspects for Commonwealth Games, for example, you know, the former athletes' village, and we're anticipating sort of almost a year's worth of work around the plot sales that will develop from that development. Including sort of some intended first homes in that scheme. So really, essentially, although it's day-to-day business for us, you know, the Commonwealth Games has imposed an additional burden to our normal work, but we take it in our stride and endeavour to support all our colleagues on all these matters where, you know, any real property aspects are involved.
So, Sean, do you want to talk to the next slide, and also Connie as well, in terms of the commercial engagement and social value aspects, if you're able to, please?
Actually, from my perspective, I think I've already touched upon the fact that you know, any sort of residual sort of real estate issues involved will continue to be dealt with my team. Obviously, the sales of the plots in the former athletes' villages is the prime matter for us, but we would continue to pick up, you know, anything ongoing on that side.
Thank you. Is there anything you want to add, Connie?
Similarly, really, as far as social value, etc., we continue always to liaise with our corporate procurement colleagues as regard the application of social value and outcomes, and we'll continue to do that. The other elements I can't really speak to so much.
Thank you, Connie. And if I may, members, there's just a couple of points that I would like to add on the issue of costs, because I know that that would be a concern for members and this committee in terms of legal support provided to directorate colleagues and service areas across the council when it comes to the Commonwealth Games. So Connie referred earlier to external support, legal support that's bespoke and provided to Craig's area. Just to assure the committee that within legal, we have our own risk register when it comes to external legal spend, and that legal spend in respect of the external support provided to the Commonwealth Games, that is closely scrutinised by us within legal. And the other point that I would like to add in relation to the matters that Sushil has talked about, so the property elements, those that legal support has, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sushil, has in the main largely been provided via legal services as an in-house provision, again with a view on as to costs, to ensure that we only go to external advisors if we absolutely have to and capacity is an issue. I hope that helps members.
And I would confirm that's the case. Most of that work has been dealt with in-house.
Thank you, Sushil.
Chair, do you want to move to any questions on any of the legal input?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thank you to all Connie, Sushil and Satinder for running through this aspect of the presentation. If we've got any questions from members, please do raise your hands. And then I'll take that. Councillor Mosquito.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to take the opportunity to say that perhaps in my 20 odd years of being a councillor, this is the best legal team that Birmingham City Council have ever had. They've been exceptionally helpful. I love the fact that they speak in plain English so we can all understand. And I just want to place on record my gratitude to them and in all that they've been doing for the city and certainly around the games. Thank you very much, Chair.
Can I just, if I may, respond to that, Chair, just to say thank you very much for your kind words, Councillor Mosquito. Very grateful. If I could blush, I would.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Thank you for the comment, Councillor Mosquito. And in that time, I think we've also got an indication from Did we have Councillor Straker-Wells? Did you have your hand raised, or am I imagining it? Because I'm sure your name popped up on my screen, but oh, here you are. Okay.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and please forgive me, I'm going to have to leave shortly. But, and I would echo what Councillor Mosquito said. I mean, the sheer complexity of this is baffling, and I feel quite lightheaded as a result of the presentation. But there was one little thought that was triggered by the word liability. Is there a giant insurance policy around all of this in which you have to invest in order to make sure that everything is looked after, whether it's additional costs, whether it's breakdown of contracts or whatever? Please forgive such an innocent question. Thank you.
Chair, if I can probably pick up, oh sorry, there's an echo going on. I can probably pick up on the whole assurance thing because I sit on the ARAC, the Audit, Risk and Assurance Committee, that covers all assurance issues, risk issues, audit issues, as you can imagine by the title, for the Commonwealth Games. So they have an assurance framework. We have an assurance framework that's been developed specifically for the Commonwealth Games, and that committee oversees all of that, and any issues that they raise are upon anyone working on the Commonwealth Games across the organising committee, so with all partners, to come in and really to give them assurance or not as to what the issue is. So that's pretty well developed for the Commonwealth Games. I would also say that we've now got one for the council as well, that's rolled out across all directorates, but that's much broader than this subject.
Thank you. I think I understood that.
So assurances, there's an actual framework for it, a structure to it that the committee work through, and any concerns they have, they call them in straight away.
Thank you. Thank you for your question, Councillor Straker-Wells, and for Becky for picking that up. The only question I had was what are the key challenges that you can see from a legal perspective in the next 6 months, or in the run-up now to the last few months up until the games? So I don't know if Connie, I don't know who might be best placed to respond to that, but just challenges that you might already be aware of or suspecting might crop up in the coming few months.
So Connie, do you want to go first, and then Sushil, and then I will just follow up if I may.
I suppose it's quite difficult to just encapsulate that, Chair. However, I suppose the synchronicity of so many disparate elements of the games all coming together at the appropriate time or at the same time may be the biggest challenge. And I guess it may be Craig's, not wanting to speak for Craig, but Craig's biggest headache possibly, that all the elements come together at the same time. We have venue use agreements for the 3 main venues across the city that must all be signed off in a timely fashion so they can be handed over to the organising committee for their overlay. And all of those things must happen in a very timely fashion and at the right time, and in the safest possible way. So I would say possibly time and events coinciding exactly might be the biggest challenge.
Sushil?
Thank you. Yes, similar matters for us, really. It is just making sure that timelines and deadlines are met and that we're resourced at the right time for the appropriate things. But all this work is sort of quite tightly managed, with regular meetings and regular assessment of risk registers, etc. So generally, we are always on top of it, before anything arises. But obviously, anything sort of last minute, we deal with as a contingency measure. But we do endeavour to predict as far as we can ahead, the problems that may arise, and try and plan for them in advance.
Thank you, Sushil. And just to echo Connie's and Sushil's points, I'm going to be really transparent and plain with members and the committee. Pace and capacity is a challenge, but that is where frequent meetings with Connie as head of law for commercial and privacy information, and Sushil as head of law for property, that's where frequent meetings are key, where we can take strategic views and discussions in terms of how capacity is going to be affected, if at all, and then build in resilience where we feel that capacity might be at risk. So I just want to assure members of the committee that those are the challenges that we face, and I think it's important to be transparent about those things, but to also further assure you that we have contingencies in place, and it's an ongoing, evolving discussion. Does that help you, Chair?
Pardon me, Satinder, if I could just add, as I said at the start, really, we do have some excellent, truly excellent additional support in the form of the secondee, and that's enormously helpful. It has built much needed capacity so that we can manage risk, or the resource risk, so much better than we might have done a few months ago.
Thank you, Connie.
Thank you. Thank you again to all of you for sort of giving your views and what the challenges may be in the future. And I will sort of wrap this part up by echoing some of the points that Councillor Mosquito made at the beginning, in terms of how much of a brilliant job that the legal team have been doing. And I do remember way back in the days where this committee first came into existence, and there was a time where we were having meetings with sort of Neil Carney, and at that point I remember the challenges that we were facing just in more or less every aspect of our involvement in the games, and a lot of the things that we were hearing in the committee was that there are legal complexities and our legal department is dealing with XYZ, and we, I remember at the time where we were asking a certain level of detail on things and we were told that that the legal department is still trying to sort out the rights to using the logo on certain elements. So there's even to the sort of nitty-gritty detail of getting to this stage. I know a lot of work has happened behind the scenes, so thank you for taking us along that journey and ensuring that we are at the stage that we're at. So thank you again. And I know that there's a little bit more left of your presentation. Becky, if I can just add though, would it be possible if we can try to conclude this item around 3 o'clock, just because we do have Paul Lancaster as well to take?
That's absolutely fine.
Thank you.
So the next, Craig, if you could just move it on, and thank you very much to the legal team, especially for stepping in so quickly. So we now move on to career pathways options for young people. And Craig, I know you're sharing, but are you able to take us through this, or Sharon?
Hi Becky, yeah, thanks. We've just got a couple of slides, so we should be fine, Chair, with your timescales. This is in typical spirit. This isn't about me presenting stuff. This is about the team. So I've asked Amajit and Sharon to talk us through. I know we came last time to the meeting to give a good update on all things in HR. This is just a little bit more of a deep dive into the career pathways that Amajit and Sharon have been working through. So I'll leave it to Amajit to shepherd us through.
Brilliant. Thanks, Craig. Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. I'll quickly go through some of the pathways that we're currently working through and proposing over the coming year or so as to how we can support young people within the city. So obviously, apprenticeships is a big pathway for us. What we're doing to try and encourage more apprentice vacancies into the organisation is actually kind of intercepting managers when they're looking to recruit, and actually engaging in conversations to consider an apprentice first, and looking at how we can start developing career pathways to support our approach to succession planning and talent management. I think with apprenticeships, one of the kind of successes that we're having is, just to share with you all, is that we've actually got 3 finalists in the Greater Birmingham Apprenticeship Awards this year. So that kind of really demonstrates the impact and the quality of our apprenticeships that we're offering. The next initiative that we're currently working on is Kickstart, which was obviously an initiative introduced by government in response to the impact COVID has had on young people. So far we have managed to offer 50 placements across the organisation, with the aim of taking on more in the coming months, in line with the scheme being extended by the Chancellor a few weeks ago. And that's about supporting young people between the ages of 16 and 24 who are currently on universal credit, offering them a paid work placement to give them that opportunity to get some experience and make themselves more employable. One of the other things we're looking at is obviously just to ensure that we've got a real inclusive approach, and that all of our young people are benefiting from our programmes, is we're looking to introduce a supported internship offer. So what that is it's about offering a programme for our young people with SEND, so that they can become independent and obviously increase their employment opportunities to help them further fulfil the opportunities and skills that they have. Another one that we're currently just finalising is actually a traineeship programme. So traineeships are a kind of a pre-apprenticeship programme, predominantly aimed at 16 to 18-year-olds. because there's always that bridge of coming out of school and then going into a work environment. So a traineeship helps build that bridge to make young people more employable and goes over the basics of, you know, workplace etiquette and so forth. And we've been engaging with our local colleges around how we can develop a public sector traineeship program and ensure that we've got something that can help drive our organisation forward, but also the young people forward and make them more employable going forward. T-levels is something that we're currently working with local colleges with and the Department for Education. So that's a big new thing going forward, as you might have heard in the news. It's something that the government is really investing in as a new qualification, which is a T-level is 80% of doing a college qualification and a 20% placement. So we're looking to work with the local colleges to be able to offer these placement opportunities to the young people to support them in achieving their qualification. We're doing a lot of work now around trying to support our care leavers. So I'm working quite closely with Juliet Walton at the Children's Trust to ensure that they're aware of all the opportunities that we have, and where possible being able to give them additional support in applications to try and encourage them to apply for job vacancies and apprenticeships that we have. But the traineeship program, for example, we've kind of had early conversations so far, but we'll be using that as a bit of a catalyst as well to support our care leavers to help them develop themselves and become more employable. We also run the National Graduate Development Programme in conjunction with the Chief Exec's Delivery Unit. So we have just recently recruited and started 8 via the LGA scheme. With plans in the pipeline to take on a future cohort next year and actually then look to further develop that into our own Birmingham graduate scheme as well. One of the other things that we're doing is outreaching with Birmingham Schools. So myself and the team have been approached by a number of Birmingham schools about how we can go into there and provide employment advice to the year 10 and 11 students to make them aware of the options available within the council, but also outside of the council as well within the city, to ensure that they're aware of all the different avenues available to them. And then one of the other things, obviously, we're doing a lot of work with our local universities as well in terms of offering university placements. It's a real good platform for us because that way we're getting access to the city's future talent, first access. So by offering these placements, we're able to demonstrate what a good employer we are, what we can offer, and then hopefully they'll consider us as an employer going forward. And we've had some really positive placement so far, and we're working with the likes of BCU, University of Birmingham, Aston, covering a range of disciplines, and we've had some really success stories coming with that, and we've got quite a few more cohorts lined up going forward. What I will do now is just bring my colleague Sharon in, because one thing we forgot to mention on there is to talk about quickly how employee volunteering is going to support the legacy of the games as well. So if we can just provide a quick update for members on that, I'll bring Sharon in now, if that's okay.
Sure, Amajit, thank you. Yeah, so as Amajit mentioned, we're looking at developing an employer-supported volunteering programme, which essentially is in line with Birmingham's Corporate Social Responsibility Charter, and as Amajit just mentioned, also supporting the legacy of the Commonwealth Games. So ultimately, we're looking to provide employees a set number of days throughout the year, set number of days within the year to volunteer at with a third sector organisation. There's a number of benefits that are attached to this, not just for the individual, but also for us to develop stronger relationships with the communities within Birmingham. So we're currently looking at developing this, and yeah, we wouldn't mind giving you an update at the next meeting following the sign off and kind of where we are with it all. Thank you.
Thanks, Sharon. And I think it's open to any questions the chair or members of the committee may have.
Thank you, Amajit and Sharon, for running through that bit of the presentation. We've had a question in the chat from Councillor Mosquito around offering opportunities to ex-offenders and those leaving young offender institutions. And she's also said that no one needs to be left behind. But if I can just ask my question before I hand it back to yourselves as well. I mean, apart from the last bit of the presentation that you've just said in relation to sort of the placements and things, the other future opportunities that you outlined in these couple of slides, they are fantastic. It's brilliant that they're taking place and that we are doing this. But my question is, how many of these future opportunities would have already been happening if we didn't have the games? Because I mean, obviously we've come to the Commonwealth Games Committee, so I'm sort of more keen on hearing exactly how many of them or which ones are as a result of us having the games in the city, or which ones will benefit in terms of a legacy aspect because of us having the games. So that's just not sort of a specific question, but just how many of those are because of the games or even linked to the Commonwealth Games. And obviously you've got the question from Councillor Mosquito, but I'm just going to take that one as in relation to the games question. Then if we can, is there any information on offering opportunities to any ex-offenders, sort of linking it back into the games? So thank you.
I think in terms of opportunities, what we've currently got linked into the game. So obviously when people are looking to, or hiring managers are looking to recruit, for example, and if we look at apprenticeships and if they are linked to the games, we're having those conversations to see, you know, can we actually look into an apprentice post rather than actually going out to direct recruit. With the Kickstart stuff, that is with the ones that we've got lined up with the scheme extension, some of the ones that we are looking at will be in direct response to the game because of the extra demand. So, for example, we've been having conversations with the resilience team. Obviously, come closer to the game, the resilience team are going to have a lot more opportunities or demands and so forth because of the games. And they've been quite engaging to look at possible kickstarts in the build up to the game. Because the Kickstart is obviously a 6-month placement program. So they feel that being able to offer those kind of opportunities will help support them to deliver the games elements as well. So that's one of the key things that we are going to be looking at in the future pipeline in terms of Kickstart as well, in terms of where we can offer these placements to support the additional resource needed for the games, and that these young people then also get to be a part of that. In terms of the ex-offenders, funny enough, I only had a conversation literally about a week or two ago with a colleague in adult social care about it. So we're having early conversations about how we can make sure we are supporting ex-offenders and what our approach is into engaging with them so that they're aware of these opportunities and can take advantage of them as well.
Oh, thank you. Okay, thanks, Amajit. I think it might be useful if we can perhaps have you back at a future meeting with a bit more of the detail in relation to how those conversations have developed further and actually resulted in opportunities for our young people, or in, trainees, and the different sort of options after. I think perhaps we may have to look at sometime maybe early next year. We'll have a look at diaries and see whether we can invite you back in and spend a little bit more time into detail of what's actually games related, if that's okay.
Yeah, most definitely. I think a lot of these programs are coming to fruition now. So once they do come into fruition, we can then target, especially how they will support the games as well, and have a focus to push that to ensure that some of the opportunities are supporting the games.
That's fine, thank you. Craig, you raised your hand, so I'll hand over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. Just to sort of add a little bit more sort of insight on the NGDP process. So we've got 8, as Amajit's raised, 8 graduates that have joined the organisation on a range of different rotations. The intention is that actually as part of their second placement, all of them will be associated with the Commonwealth Games as well. So in essence, what we've got is 8 graduates who will join the Commonwealth Games team. That's the proposal at the moment, to really add one to gain some additional once in a lifetime skills and opportunities to sort of gold dust their experience, but 2 for us to enable us to really benefit from a different viewpoint and real diversity of thoughts when it comes to how we operationally support the games itself, and then obviously into the legacy and the longer term benefits for the city. But certainly more than happy to work with Amajit to come back into the new year to really specify where those graduate traineeship, Kickstart, apprenticeships are directly linked to the games and the legacy of the games.
Yes, thank you, Craig. That does sound quite positive, and it'd be good, like I said, for you guys to come back at a future meeting. And just as a final point, the thing that you started off with earlier under apprenticeships, Amajit, around the 3 finalists, great news. I know I know we were asking about the Commonwealth Games, but it's always good to use this opportunity to find out about positive things that are happening. And if we do have 3 finalists, and did you say the Greater Birmingham Apprenticeship Awards?
Yes, it's the Greater Birmingham Apprenticeship Awards. So we managed to get 3 finalists, which is really encouraging.
Yeah, that is very encouraging. Thank you so much for your presentation. And I'm just mindful, because I keep looking over at the time, and I know that members have got other commitments as well. So just checking to see whether we've got anything else on this presentation.
There was just one final slide, Chair. It was about legal input for future opportunities, but I'm not sure whether, Satinder, you want to talk through this or whether it was covered from the presentation earlier.
So I will do, but just conscious of the Chair's comments in terms of time. So colleagues previously spoke to the committee a few minutes ago about the external legal support that's being provided, ongoing and future work in relation to Alexander Stadium, and that ties in with the legacy aspirations for the council. And so unless there are any specific questions that the committee has, that is all from me, and I'm very grateful to my colleagues Connie and Sushil for assisting me and the committee this afternoon.
Yeah, thank you. I haven't received any sort of notification or indication from members whilst you were speaking, Satinder, and I don't have any other questions or comments to add. So on that note, I'd like to just say a thank you to Becky and your entire team, so all the other officers who have presented. And if Becky, if you wanted any final words, you I'll hand over to you, and otherwise we can continue with the rest of the meeting after that. Thank you.
2 seconds, Chair, and then I'll let you, obviously it's your meeting to continue. So what I'd say is, as we develop legacy even further, then obviously you'll probably want us to come back and to see where we're going as legacy develops, I'm assuming.
Yes, so whilst I was muted, that nodding was yes. That was very helpful, because obviously there's 2 parts to this. Yeah. We're interested in what's happening at the run up of the games, but obviously as all of that sort of ties into place, it's always really important for us to find out how the citizens of Birmingham will benefit post games. So yes, we'll play by ear and see what stage would be the most appropriate for you to come back and have a bit more sort of detail on the legacy aspects of it in the future. So thank you again.
Thank you.
We'll see you guys at some point next year. Awesome. Thank you. Bye. Just going to pause for a moment whilst they leave, and in that time, Paul Lancaster, thank you ever so much for waiting patiently. Thank you. I know that I think you were here probably from the beginning of the meeting, but thank you again for waiting. We've got Paul Lancaster in attendance from Regulation and Enforcement, and I will hand over directly to Paul so you can go through your presentation with us. And as always, we'll take any questions from members after your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. So I'll go through the presentation. I've got slides. Hopefully you've now got that up on your screen, and then I'll do the slideshow, which should start, sort of straight away now. So looking at that, the contents of this presentation, I'll outline what regulation enforcement's role is in the Commonwealth Games, talk about the Commonwealth Games Act, which I know Connie mentioned earlier, the actions to date, the risks that we've got, any opportunities there might be, which also links to legacy, future actions, and then just a very short summary. It would help me if so I could go through the presentation and then perhaps take questions at the end, if that's okay with you, Chair. Sorry, I'll just go back to that. So the role in the Commonwealth Games, well, it covers the following activities. Obviously, the management of reactive work. We've still got business as usual while the Games is going on. Environmental health trading standards licensing doesn't stop for that, and probably work will increase due to the impact of the Games anyway. We've got the enforcement of the Birmingham Commonwealth Games Act legislation, which is specific new legislation, the licensing of events, the coordination of venue authorities, so all of the other authorities involved in hosting the Birmingham Commonwealth Games, and then we've got a new designated stadium, a safety certificate for the Alexander Stadium, for which regulation enforcement are responsible for issuing, and then just a word about resource planning. Other activities. Liaison with and contribution to DCMS proposals. That's really been, I joined the authority in July 2019, and pretty much straight away I was involved in discussions with the Department of Culture, Media and Science around what we were going to do about regulation, what the likely legislation would be, and how we'd approach it as the host city. Liaising with the organising committee. We at least monthly, every other month, we do actually meet them formally with all the venue authority leads, but I'll go into that in a bit. We liaise with and provide support to venue authorities, and we agree the enforcement arrangements. We want the Games to be regulated the same in London Borough of Newham as it is in Wolverhampton, etc. So we want to try and have that consistency, so it's a better regulation approach. We're trying to ensure that because of the demands of the Games, that we reschedule proactive inspections that were going to happen during the Games period, that sort of 12, 14 days, because it's not just the Games period, it's day -4 when sort of really things happen that we need to get ourselves sort of coordinated for. So the idea is that any inspections that were due around the Games, we try and either bring them forward or put them back so that they're into following weeks, months to actually make sure we still hit our food law enforcement programme. And then we're sourcing potential mutual aid and volunteering arrangements. So what does the Birmingham Commonwealth Games Act provision do for regulation enforcement? It places a duty on Birmingham City Council to enforce the Act, as with the other venue authorities, and it mainly covers trading standards activities. So it introduces a statutory duty to inform businesses of restrictions, and we'll be working with colleagues in the communications team to ensure that we do that in a coordinated approach. Our particular point in that one is we believe it's a 3-stage approach necessary. Tell them once the regulations come into force, and that the regulations were actually laid in Parliament on Friday last. And so when they come in about a month's time, we would then go out and tell businesses that there are restrictions on trading and advertising. We would also then go again in the sort of between round about February, March time, and then we'll go again round about June, July time to make sure that businesses are absolutely aware. So the more we can tell them, make them aware, the less likelihood there is that businesses will inadvertently breach the regulations. The restrictions will cover advertising and trading within designated areas. So that means that around each of the venues, there is a walking route that's been designated. And within that area, you can't, for instance, have new advertising put out. You can imagine that if we've got where pavement licenses is in place, to put it into context, if I don't want to say, well, say it was Coca-Cola who were a sponsor of the Games, and somebody had Pepsi Cola as their sponsor of their umbrellas outside their premises. That leads immediately to an issue for the organising committee. So in those areas, in order for businesses to advertise, put new advertisements up, or to have trading areas in front of their premises, they will actually have to seek permission of the organising committee. So we'll make them aware of the arrangements for that too. Brand protection, again, that's around the logo, counterfeit goods and the like, ensuring that we actually do protect the Birmingham Commonwealth Games brand so that they can maximise their income, because there are income targets associated with the games. And also making sure that there's no ticket touting, ticket sales, working with colleagues in it's actually City of London Police, but also with West Midlands Police. City of London Police lead on electronic ticketing arrangements. So we also, there are provisions in the Act. These regulations came into force some weeks ago during July, where actually if we enforce incorrectly, then we would have to pay compensation to the business. So that means if we decided that someone had breached the regulations and instructed them to do something and they hadn't actually breached the regulations, quite rightly, we as a local authority would have to pay compensation. That probably has exercised the minds of colleagues in the DCMS and the organising committee more than it has for us, because those provisions are currently within trading standards legislation. We've lived with them for some years now since that legislation was passed, and we've not had to pay compensation for enforcing incorrectly. I go on the basis we don't intend to start enforcing incorrectly now. So what have we done? So back in 2019, we actually introduced an action plan about how we would coordinate with our venue authority colleagues, the sorts of actions we needed to do for Birmingham, where we could share that work with our colleagues, so that it was a do it once approach. There was no need for Sandwell to do stuff if we'd already done it, and vice versa. So we could actually try and coordinate and make best use of our resources moving forward. But then obviously 2020, COVID happened, and that actually, if you like, took out all of the slack within the action plan that we had in 2019. So we then restarted again at the beginning of this year, and we've had to move things forward, and there's no slack, so we actually have to deliver things as we are saying during that time. It's fair to say the joint working now is working really well, and we are getting a lot of benefit from working with our colleagues across the West Midlands and also London Borough of Newham and in Warwickshire and Staffordshire. We've identified skills that were available, and to some degree the skills that we were perhaps lacking. That was in 2019. We'll shortly be updating that to make sure that if we've got training requirements, we can implement those in plenty of time for the games. The sorts of training and skills there might be would be knowledge around temporary structures, how you have to enforce them, and also taking, for example, the open water in Pals Pool, Sutton Park, making sure we know how the waters behave in terms of bacteriological and chemical quality as we move through the times, knowing what might happen during the games. So all sorts of things that we have to do just to identify and ensure officers are fully aware of what they're doing. So we've implemented that series of meetings with venue authorities and the organising committee, and we've also put in place a Teams database so that we've got a depository of documents that are important to us as regulators that we share across all of the venue authorities. We drafted a joint authority enforcement policy, which will be an addendum to our own existing one, and we will finalise that before the end of December. Why haven't we finalised it before now? Because we weren't actually entirely sure what the regulations were going to say, which were, as I say, tabled in the House of Commons or the House of Parliament on Friday. We've set up a risk register, the sorts of things that might lead to issues for us. We've drafted a workforce plan, and really that's gone a number of versions. As we have done with budgets, we've gone on to version 5, just altering, making sure that any resources we need are targeted towards the games period. We've provided we set up Smartsheet, which is something the Commonwealth Games team use. We've revised that only in the last couple of weeks as well. We provided detailed assessments of the trading and advertising restrictions proposals, and the organising committee and DCMS have adjusted their areas that were going to be restricted as a result of our representations. We've made initial preparations for implementing the statutory duty to engage businesses, and I outlined that in the thought processes with regards to the having 3 straight approach to informing our businesses. We devised new resourcing models, and I can go into that in a bit more detail later, Chair, if it's wanted by committee, but you've had a long day already on presentations. We're undertaking partnership work with the UK Health Security Agency. That is the replacement of Public Health England. So just so you're aware, it's Public Health England, but part of their role has been replaced by the UK HSA. We're working with the Health and Safety Executive very closely. Why? Because the Health and Safety Executive and local authorities are the 2 enforcing authorities of health and safety at work legislation. Where it's a local authority undertaking, the Health and Safety Executive would enforce. Where it's not, it's just leisure, a leisure facility that is operated by a private sector or by the organising committee, it would be the local authority to actually implement. So we're undertaking that, looking to put in place a memorandum of understanding between the 2 organisations around that too. We've increased the sampling programme at Powell's Pool. We know of some issues in the past, and we're trying to make sure we've got detailed information, as said, going into the future. So during the Commonwealth Games, we will operate either a 2 or 3 shift system for the Commonwealth Games. What that means is that we will start our work day for regulation enforcement an hour before the first event starts, and we will continue with it until an hour after the last event finishes on the day. We've clustered sites together into 3 clusters, and we've said that we've applied resourcing to each of the areas there based on managers, qualified environmental health officers, qualified training standards officers, qualified licensing officers, and then we have enforcement officers who support all of those, and also a new category for us, learning from what we did with COVID and COVID marshals, enforcement wardens. We've also got a lot of work that we've started to materialise, so there is a handover and communications in between each shift. We've also seconded an officer to Public Health England, now the UK Health Security Agency, and she is working on that. We've been funded for that, so we're also backfilling her role so that we can actually make sure we don't get behind with our own work as we lead up to the Games. We've reviewed our operational procedures in conjunction with Better Business for All, and this is a real opportunity for us to get better procedures, because by sharing what every authority has done, we can take the best of everyone in dealing with things and come out with better procedures at the end of it. I've also set up an interim arrangement with the Chartered Institute of Environmental Health, where if they get approached by qualified EHOs across the country who want to volunteer to work on the Games, then actually they get forwarded to myself, and we can actually see whether we can work with those individuals and whether they're of the quality of individual that we will require for enforcement during the Games. We've reviewed mutual aid proposals. So mutual aid is a process where local authorities share resources between each other. We have a mutual aid agreement in place in relation to civil emergencies. We used it during COVID to help us in areas such as registration and the like. And we're also looking at what could we do for the regulatory and enforcement services that all the authorities run. Is there an opportunity to do that? Not just in the venue authorities, but also in other authorities who might be willing to share resources during that time of the Games. It's a great career opportunity for the qualified officers. They won't come across this opportunity, in all likelihood, again during their careers. We've started to approve the organising committee documents. There's a food safety policy that we've signed off now, and that's been issued, and that's being issued to all of their contracted caterers. And then we've outlined the expectations in relation to test events for the Alexander Stadium, which is quite an involved process that will start from about April onwards. So what are the risks? Like everything, the lack of enforcement officer availability. The requirements for control of the Commonwealth Games Act and enforcing the Commonwealth Games Act potentially could take more resources than is in existence across the central region of England in relation to trading standards. So we've got to look at how we're dealing with that. We're starting to do some scenario planning if there is a major COVID-19 wave coinciding with the Games. We've also got the risk there in relation to civil emergency at the time of the Games and any major incident that might happen at the time Games, flooding, or that doesn't quite come up to a civil emergency but still is a major incident. And then generally that the authorities don't operate in the same way across the different areas. We can't have some traders being better off by only working in one area rather than the other area. So we want to make sure that we're consistent in how we approach enforcement. Something comes out of the woodwork that we don't actually expect. So the budget that we is insufficient. We've applied for a budget from the Commonwealth Games Office within the City Council to the tune of about £600,000. If that budget doesn't get approved, we won't be able to do everything we're actually trying to do in managing the games and the enforcement during that time. Another risk is in relation to the activities leads to a failure to meet the Food Standards Agency inspection requirements. The City Council has had a checkered past in relation to its ability to deliver the food standards inspections. And if we don't meet the requirements by the end of 2022 with the recovery plan that's in place, it is feasible that we will have further issues with the FSA. We can't afford that as a city council, and so we're doing everything we can to try and manage that risk as well. Other venue authorities having insufficient resources. I think it's fair to say over the last 10 years that regulatory services have had a lot of staff taken out of them, both here in Birmingham, but also in other areas. And that sufficiency of resources, if we can address it through mutual aid, might well be a way of managing that in a better way. And then I mention skills and training, making sure enforcement officers know what they're doing and the hazards they're likely to come across and how they might enforce against those hazards. And then any other issue, anything that might come out of the woodwork. I could think of one issue, but I'm not going to actually mention it in case it gives people ideas to cause disruption during the games. So I'll tell you that, Chair, offline if you like. So what are the opportunities or legacy? Well, if we work well with all of our local neighbours, if you like, in terms of who are hosting events, that could lead to a potential sharing of services or sharing of approach so that we can, if you like, make our use of resources much more effective. We'll have better trained enforcement officers, and that builds capacity, because if we follow the skills programme that we will update, they will be able to achieve far more without having to come back for, if you like, the experience of other officers to help them deal with things. If the new enforcement model that we put in using wardens really does take off and proves to be a great benefit and more effective service, then actually what we could do is put that into effect later on after the games. I think that anything we do in relation to enforcing, and if enforcement is done in a really good way and is recognised either through best in class awards or for people just saying how well we've done, that's obviously a reputation improvement for the City Council. I think building the relationships with partner agencies like the HSE, the UK HSA, and also local authority partners will actually lead to more influence for the city and actually being better thought of. So what are the next actions for me? Well, I need very quickly to finalise the budget, the workforce plan and the enforcement policy. got to make sure we've got all of our training activities identified and the skills update done. The style keep changing, so we've got to time it right on that one. And then there's stage 1 of the business engagement process towards the end of November, when the legislation is likely to be confirmed, and then to firm up our mutual aid proposals, to have that assurance that we might be able to obtain other staffing from elsewhere if we have some difficulty during the Commonwealth Games period. So to summarise, Chair, very quick run through for you. I've outlined the roles of regulation enforcement and what we're doing within the Games, not forgetting the specific statutory duties that are contained within the Commonwealth Games Act and how we have to respond to them. You had an overview of the actions to date and the next steps, and we've also summarised risks and opportunities. Chair, I'm happy to take any questions. I can go into to show you the resourcing tool if you so wish, but I think for the moment that's more than enough. It gives me a chance just to breathe and let other people speak as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you ever so much, Paul, for your comprehensive, very detailed presentation. I know that whilst you were towards the end of your presentation, a couple of members did have to unfortunately leave, but I know that if anybody was to go back and have a look at your presentation and your slides, because of how well detailed they were, it does give a very good summary of all of the things that come under regulation and enforcement. And I know that as we did have our sort of pre-meet, we did cover a lot as well in that. So I only had probably a couple of questions, but that just goes, that's a credit to you and your presentation skills, because a lot of the things that any members would have possibly liked to have asked are already covered in your bullet points. The question I did have, and in the meantime, if any members do have any questions, just to indicate, but I'm mindful of time, so I'll go straight ahead and ask Paul if that's okay with you, Paul.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Just on your risks slide, risks 2.
Yeah.
One of the ones I identified was around budget not approved or insufficient, and you referred to £600,000 and the possible issues that you may have that wasn't to be approved. Can we have a little bit more information as to who needs to approve that, or where is that coming from, and who needs to make the decision on that?
Okay, well, we've done a number of versions of the budget, as I indicated to you, Councillor Khan, and what we've done is we're just ironing out those last issues. It's actually Alison Jarrett team, who you heard from earlier, who will be approving or not approving the budget, as the case may be. I think it's just finalising that bit so that we can lead people in. But I know that Alison's not here, so I think that I won't say any more than that. But we're still working on it.
Okay, no, that's fine. Thank you for clearing that up. And the other thing I did want to sort of touch on was in our pre-meeting. I don't think it was mentioned in this presentation, which is why I'm just bringing it up. Or it may be there, and apologies if it was. When we met outside of this meeting, at that point we spoke about potentially, or you were looking at if there were any possibility of events taking place throughout the night during Games period. Is that have there been any sort of developments on that, and how does that impact reg and enforcement?
Okay, so there are some views that perhaps in the city we should have 24-hour licensed events going on, sort of 24 during the period of the Games. So if you like, a very much sort of a party-based atmosphere within the city. The reason I've not mentioned it at the moment is because I haven't heard formally that that's what's being wanted. We will need to decide that fairly quickly as a city council, whether we wish to do that for the Games or whether there's specific policy. How would that affect me? It would probably affect me. Again, it's the resources. It's what do I cover night shifts effectively, through the night for different staff. It would put a strain on us, but actually it just depends on how well those events are managed, and we would be planning them out very carefully using safety advisory group processes. I think it's somewhere where local ward members, if there are those proposals, it would be I think there'll be a need for a conversation about how do you think this would go? what do you think we should do to control, and the different elements there might be. But I think it's very much it's hard to prophesize how this will take off within the city. One hopes it's going to be one of the events of the century, if you like, in Birmingham, because you don't often get that chance to host something as important as this. And if the longer licensing hours can contribute to that, then we as regulators must find a way to make that work, and work in a way that people don't get disturbed. They're able to enjoy the event, but it doesn't affect their day-to-day lives.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And that's obviously understandable. So I wasn't sure if that was the reason why it wasn't in the presentation.
Yeah.
And the only other sort of thing I wanted to touch on was, I know that you said that there is, in order for there to be effective regulation, working alongside other local authorities and ensuring that the same sort of enforcement policies are going to be in place. And under your opportunities and legacy slide, it does say that there's joint working leading to potential shared services in the future. It was just really a comment to say that it's, you know, if that does come into fruition, if that does happen afterwards, then I think that that's a positive sort of legacy outcome for the city, because obviously, although we are Birmingham, some of our boundaries for some local residents, you know, you have a boundary on a road that you live on. So so it's good to see that that Reg and Enforcement are looking into how we can positively change the service because of having the games in place. I don't have any other sort of comments or questions, apart from just to say that thank you for your presentation, and also for all the work that goes into getting to this stage. I think that as we get closer to the games, the more sort of active role will play into effect with your officers being on the ground and actually ensuring that the games are the best games that the city can provide for all, and also safe and happy, sort of with all the legal things in place. So thank you again, Paul. And I'm just going to pause just for a slight moment to see if there are any comments from any other members. And if there aren't, then we are able to move on. But again, your presentation was really good. And actually, I was thinking this whilst you were giving your presentation, that if any of the other directorates do come to our committee, would like to see a good example of how you know the presentations can come to our Commonwealth Games Committee, then yours is a brilliant example, because it did pretty much cover any questions or comments that members may have, and it was in a language that we can all understand and read really well, without all the sort of techie things that some of the other presentations come with. Thank you, Paul, again.
Thank you very much, Chair. Can I just say two things? I can assure you I was grey-haired before I came here, so it hasn't added to that. and I think secondly, thank you members for either leaving early and letting me off lightly. So happy to come back to you at any time if you want more information or detail of individual bits. Happy to help in that way.
Thank you. No, thank you ever so much. And if there are any bits that members find that maybe don't require a full presentation, then I'm sure that we can send you things sort of via email, and you'd be able to provide us with that information, if that's okay with you.
No problem whatsoever.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thanks again.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you. We'll now be able to just move on to the rest of the agenda, but I'm going to run through it really quickly because we have gone past 3:30. So under the work programme, depending on how many members we may have left, an update on waste will be discussed at the next meeting on the 8th of December. If any members have got any comments as to what else they'd like in future meetings, then please just drop me an email and we can look at diaries and see how that goes. But I've also had a conversation with the leader, and we should be having the leader coming to committee early next year as well, just to get a bit of an update from the leader. The date of the next meeting, item 9, it's the 8th of December at 1:30. That's just a note. Number 10 has to be deferred because it's not a formal meeting. And then any other urgent business?
None, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mosquito. In that case, then we can end this meeting, because again, item 12 can't happen as it's not a formal meeting.